And you're listening to Lunchtime on News Talk. The text line for your messages is 53106. Jonathan, you've been out and about very early this morning. You managed to doorstep, I think the word is, Martin McGuinness, and you asked him some rather direct and pertinent questions. What were they?
Well, we've had a lot of debate within the last couple of days about Martin McGuinness and his role in the IRA when he was involved with them in the 1970s that he has admitted to. We've had the debate yesterday. The Environment Minister, Phil Hogan, made the point that perhaps Mr McGuinness carries too much baggage to become the President of Ireland. And then we had Gay Byrne's comments last night where he called Martin McGuinness a liar. So it reached the point of which today Martin McGuinness was in Cork, so perhaps the time was right to ask him a very direct question. Myself and my colleague from TV3, Paul Byrne, met him as he was about to go into an interview with local radio station 96 FM here, and the question was put to him directly.
Did you ever kill anyone during your time in the IRA, yes or no?
No.
Were you ever indirectly responsible for the deaths of people?
No. I was on the IRA in Derry in the very early 70s. I joined the IRA because the British Army came onto our streets in the aftermath of the RUC beating our people off the streets when I was 18 years of age. No, I didn't say I never fired a gun. I mean, I was in the IRA and there were battles on the streets of Derry. I've never run away from that. But I'm not going to sensationalise in interviews something that can be then used to the detriment of the peace process and indeed to the detriment of my colleagues within government, those people who have been courageous, like Ian Paisley and Peter Robinson, to come forward and join with us. I have made my peace with unionist leaders, working in government with them. But I do think that some people in the media down here, small elements of the media and in other political parties, need to think about peacemaking and how they make their peace with me.
And that was Martin McGuinness talking to Jonathan Healy, my co-presenter, earlier in the centre of Cork City earlier this morning. Now, that follows remarks made by Martin McGuinness on Tuesday here on the programme. He said on that occasion that there were West Brits in the media trying to pull him down. There were people with past political associations that they wanted to bury. On the very same day, Fintan O'Toole wrote in the Irish Times and basically took part in the debate. He said that McGuinness, quote unquote, could be liable to arrest for war crimes. He cited the 4th Geneva Convention and he said that the Irish Republican Army under Martin McGuinness had breached every aspect of the 4th Geneva Convention. Then yesterday on our programme, Eamon Dunphy, the celebrated writer and broadcaster and journalist, came on and he said he rebutted Fintan's ideas most forcefully. He dissected them and deconstructed them, and his contribution to the debate attracted a massive volume of text messaging. I think it was about 66% in favour of Eamon Dunphy and about 33% against. We also got loads of emails yesterday. Just to give you a very small sample of them before we start the debate today. A listener says, "Hi, I just wanted to say it's a pleasure and informative to listen to Eamon Dunphy. Martin McGuinness leads everyone else in the halfpenny place and will be getting my vote," says Peter. "Hi Damien, thank you for giving the people of Ireland an opportunity to hear Eamon Dunphy talk with such candour and valour. I wish there were more people like him to stand up and take a moral stand in the face of adversity of the same old closed shop. I'm not sure I will vote for McGuinness, but it is refreshing to hear honesty and fair play," says John O'Hara in Carlow. "Why are the people surprised by Fintan? He has already done a hatchet job on Gaybo and David Norris. Anyone who's a threat to the Labour candidate gets the treatment from him. Gay Mitchell will get it when he rises in the polls." Well done to Eamon. They're not all in favour of Eamon. Listeners, Alan Kiley says, "To say Martin McGuinness is on an equal footing with Mandela is comical. Did Martin McGuinness spend 27 years in jail for his cause?" Listener says, "Hello, I can't believe that you allowed this completely one-sided rant by Eamon Dunphy. He is totally wrong when he says that Martin McGuinness has the support of the Irish people. There are many families in Ireland and Britain grieving a loved one due to the decisions of McGuinness and the actions." And that's from Jennifer in Tala. Listener says that moral high ground is a rather dangerous place to be. I'm just wondering where Fintan O'Toole will be able to vote for the politicians who conspired to turn a blind eye or accommodate extraordinary rendition through Shannon. That's from Jimmy in Racecourse Road in Dundalk. Loads more in that vein. And listener T. Sheehy in Kerry says, "I've never heard such unreconstructed rubbish from Eamon Dunphy." Another listener, Derek, says, "While Eamon Dunphy has missed or ignored some point, everyone is missing the main point. The fact is that McGuinness will be on the ballot paper and he's met each and every criteria. After that, it's up to the electorate to decide." And a listener says, "This is Henry Blaney. Listen, the people of Ireland, 95% voted for the peace process. The peace process was designed for this country to put the war behind us. If McGuinness is good enough for the people of the 6 counties, then the people down here should not insult the people of the 6 counties by refusing to accept him here. Fair play to Eamon Dunphy. They're just a sample of the messages we got yesterday. Can't bring you all of them, obviously, and we were just inundated with walls after walls of text messaging as well about the same subject. We're joined now by the 2 participants in the debate. Fintan O'Toole, who's a columnist with the Irish Times, Eamon Dunphy, who's presenter of the Dunphy Show here on News Talk, among many other things, both of them distinguished authors. Fintan O'Toole, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Why are you picking on Martin McGuinness? There are loads of people running countries all over the world who have come in from the cold, so to speak, and who have basically changed their ways. They might have been described as terrorists. They're now prime ministers, presidents and so forth. Why are you trying to prevent this man standing for president, offering himself to the electorate?
Well, of course, I'm not attempting to prevent anybody from standing and offering themselves to the electorate. I'm expressing an opinion about someone who is the presidential candidate. That's called democracy. Can I just firstly, there were 2 things which were raised in the texts that I just think really need to be cleared up because they're factually libelous and entirely wrong. I have no connection whatsoever to Michael D. Higgins or the Labour Party. I'm not supporting any candidate in the election, and I have nothing whatsoever to do with any of the campaigns. And it's just a slur to suggest that I have. Secondly, the point was raised that I'm being hypocritical because apparently I have gone along with illegal renditions through Shannon. People can check on the public record. I was the first journalist in mainstream.
No, that was a rhetorical question by one of our emails.
It was a factual issue which was raised. It is entirely wrong.
The emailer asked, how would you manage to support people in government in Ireland who had,
Yes, and it is factually wrong because I do not support people in government.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I was the first journalist to raise the issue in the mainstream media of the fact that there were illegal renditions going on through Shannon. I have consistently raised this issue over
those points are
quite a number of years.
Those points are crystal clear.
So simply what I've been trying to do, right, is to be consistent. And consistency requires that you have a view of human rights which is based in international law, and that you apply that same set of criteria to whoever may be in the news or may be seeking office, right? Now, the idea, first of all, that I've singled out Martin McGuinness in some way is completely untrue. I have a consistent record of applying exactly the same principles of human rights to pretty much every issue. And I've very deliberately in trying to write about this, because it is a hugely emotive area. So what I've tried to do is look objectively, right? Let's look at what international law is. And international law is contained in the Geneva Conventions, which were, by the way, were put in place after the struggle against the Nazis in the 1940s. So they weren't put in place in some kind of naive context whereby people said, oh, well, it'd be great if we could have kind of clean conflict. What the international community on all sides came forward to say was, look, in the course of a conflict, even if that conflict is legitimate, I mean, they were even saying, look, even if it's the conflict against the Nazis, there are certain things you cannot do. And those things are listed. They include you can't murder non-combatants, you can't kidnap people, you can't torture people, you can't subject people to inhuman and degrading treatment, you can't execute people as a result of kangaroo courts. And it is a matter of historical fact. People can go and read. I would really suggest they go and read a book called Lost Lives, which is a very objective account of all the people who were killed in the course of the conflict. It's a matter of historical fact that the IRA consistently and over a very long period of time breached every one of those provisions of the Geneva Convention.
Of the Fourth Geneva Convention,
yeah.
Okay.
And those are war crimes. Now,
yeah.
The suggestion seems to be that somehow this is something that is not legitimate for us to discuss in the course of a presidential election campaign. So, for example, it is legitimate, and I completely believe it was legitimate, to raise questions about what David Norris did in writing letters seeking clemency for his former lover.
Okay.
If that's legitimate, are we really saying it's not legitimate to talk about war crimes?
In the public interest to ask these questions about the Fourth Geneva Convention. Eamon Dunphy, you've been listening to that. What's your response?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if the Geneva Convention was applied to the paratroopers who murdered 14 people on Bloody Sunday, Edward Heath, who was Prime Minister at the time, and certainly Commander Jackson, who was commanding those forces, they would be, I take it, Fintan would agree, subject to the Geneva Convention.
I would agree entirely.
Right,
Absolutely.
and also the Bush-Cheney administration
Sure.
in the United States. You'd agree with that?
Absolutely. I've never argued otherwise. This is a consistent set of international standards.
Okay,
which must be applied.
and Tony Blair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So in this context, the IRA people responsible for these crimes, which, as you know very well, Fintan, I opposed robustly for 10 years and almost single-handedly in mainstream media here. I deplore terrorism for the achievement of political ends. But to single out Martin McGuinness and associate him with all of these vile crimes, and to assert, and I have to say pretty ridiculously, Fintan, that he is likely to be lifted and taken.
I never made that assertion. I said it was possible that he could be. That's not at all the same thing as saying.
Well, what you said, I have it in front of me. The question to put it starkly, is whether we should have a head of state who would, in principle, be liable to arrest for war crimes under.
But he would, in principle, be liable to arrest. That is not. Sorry, Eamon, you're very good at.
Let me finish.
One voice.
I didn't interrupt
please,
you.
I did not say it was likely.
Please, one voice, Eamon. Please,
right, I didn't interrupt you, Fintan. I just want to say, why invoke the prospect of international war crimes and stick them on Martin McGuinness when they're equally applicable to major leaders in the world democracies, including Bill Clinton, including Tony Blair, Edward Heath. And don't forget, you begin your piece by saying the peace process was one of the IRA getting itself out of a cesspit it had dug for itself. The IRA did not begin this terrible war. It was inflicted on the people of the north of Ireland by a brutal British regime, and when the civil rights movement tried peacefully to demonstrate against it, they were brutally put down by the RUC and Paisleyites and their ilk. And in now that's that's the background to this. So to isolate, to write a piece, you're a very influential columnist, and I consider you to be a good colleague of mine. So I don't want to get nasty and personal. But the piece you wrote on Tuesday, on Monday, it was outrageous. On Monday, in your newspaper, there was a report of a memorial mass for Sean Cronin, who was the Chief of Staff of the IRA, which launched the border campaign in the late 1950s and subsequently became the Washington correspondent for your newspaper.
Yes, and the mass. Eamon, the mass was attended by a number of senior executives of the Irish Times. Fintan O'Toole, can you deal with some of those issues? Because it seems you're being very, very selective, particularly because Martin McGuinness has offered himself as a potential future president of the Irish Republic.
Well, hold on. I think there's actually a very important question about selectivity involved here. I have been completely consistent in all of this. Now, there's a word that I think Eamon has probably heard, and I'm sure you have, and it's a word actually I first learned from a member of the IRA, and it's a word called whataboutery. And whataboutery became the kind of moral evasion throughout the whole course of the Northern Ireland conflict, which was when there was an atrocity committed by the IRA, they said, yeah, but what about the Brits? When there was an atrocity committed by the Loyalists, they said, yeah, but what about the IRA putting the bomb in the Shankill Road? Whataboutery is it's a very, very common attempt to evade the issue.
So you're confronting the issue as opposed to engaging in whataboutery. What I want to ask you, Fintan, is how long do you expect a person like Martin McGuinness to be unfit to serve in the highest elected office in the country if he's so chosen by the people of Ireland? How long is he contaminated for? David Trimble in the past used to refer to the whole process of house training nationalists. How long does this process go on in your mind?
In my mind, well, first of all, there's no statute of limitations for war crimes. That's the simple fact. Secondly, we have had no process at all. You raised the issue of selectivity, and I think it's a very important one, right? I was in West Belfast this summer, and I was at a very moving exhibition in West Belfast at the festival. On the Ballymurphy massacres by the British Army in 1971. If you talk to the families of the victims, the people who've been left behind, 1971 doesn't seem a long time ago to them. you're talking to people whose fathers were killed, for example.
Yes, but
Fintan, can you let me make a point?
Fintan, can I just ask
you?
Can I just ask you a point? Sean McBride, for example, became Minister for External Affairs in the inter-party government in 1948. He was a former leader of Sair era in the 1930s. Lamass walked into Dáil Éireann in 1932 with a gun in his pocket.
Can I just ask you a question? Are you acting as a neutral chairman in this discussion?
I am, yes. I am asking. I'm asking you legitimate questions.
Well, you didn't ask Eamon any questions, by the way.
Well, I am going to.
Well, I will listen with great interest. If you could let me finish the point I was trying to make, because it's actually quite important. When you raise the question, I'm trying to answer the question. The question you raise is about selectivity. Sinn Féin and I actually completely agree on this issue. The Sinn Féin position is that there should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a process whereby all the cards are on the table, all the truth is out, and then if you have that process, like you've had in South Africa, then you can say, okay, we've dealt with the past and it is over. What we have instead is a highly selective version of the past, right? So I completely support the right of the families of people in Ballymurphy whose loved ones were killed in 1971 to have a full accounting of what happened to them. I also support, and this is the difference, I also support the right of the people, the families who were killed in T-Ban Cross, in Enniskillen, in Kingsmills and Le Mans and so on.
Okay, let's put these points to Eamon Dunphy.
Having some kind of cordon sanitaire around the candidate. Martin McGuinness chose to stand as a candidate for a highly personalised office. This is a party office, it's not a party
Okay, fine. Now, I want to put some of these points. Eamon Dunphy, Martin McGuinness, if he was elected, would be the head of, technically, of the armed forces and the Irish Army and the Garda Síochána. Mm-hmm. You've interviewed him repeatedly in the past and in great depth, and part of your work as a journalist trying to explore the development of the peace process. He used the term the army routinely in some of those discussions. He was referring to the IRA. Is it possible for Gardaí and Irish Army officers to accept him as their legitimate president, to accept his authority?
Well, the people who will decide are the electors in Ireland. The Irish people will decide this election. And they are the ultimate arbiters, and if they decide that Martin McGuinness should be president of Ireland, then the Army and the Guards will be obliged to accept that judgment. I would say that I was a serious critic of the IRA for 10 years, along with a number of other people in the Sunday Independent, and a lot of people who are now talking raising the spectre of war crimes and that were very, very mute at the time. There is a question I'd like to ask Fintan, and it's very personal to his activity as a journalist. Fintan, you were a serious supporter of Mary Robinson, and I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you wrote speeches for her. In 1993, when she was as President of Ireland, she shook Gerry Adams' hand in West Belfast, representing the people of Ireland in her role as President. In doing so, I was outraged because at that time the victims, as you call them rightly, were piling up. And she legitimised Gerry Adams and the IRA on behalf of the people of this country, and you did not comment.
That's completely untrue. You've asked me a question, and I hope I'll be allowed to answer.
Of course you will.
First of all, it's interesting that you're the one asking the questions, but anyway... It is, first of all, completely untrue.
Well, I'm quite prepared to answer questions, Fintan.
Are you going to let me answer?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I didn't write speeches for Mary Robinson. Secondly, you're completely and utterly inaccurate, and you can go and check. There's an archive of the Irish Times, and you can go and check. I did comment. And in fact, and this is rather ironic, I supported Mary Robinson and said that there was something rather ridiculous about the fuss that was being made about the fact that she had shaken hands with an MP who was elected by the people of West Belfast. And you see, you're trying to put me into a kind of caricatured position.
You're putting everyone else in a caricatured position, particularly and most malevolently Martin McGuinness.
Damien, are you going to share this discussion in some kind of neutral way that I'm allowed to actually answer the question?
Okay, well, look, you've criticised Eamon, you've criticised me.
No, hold on. Am I going to be allowed to answer the question?
Eamon Dunphy, I want to ask you a question.
Sorry, but look...
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay, right.
Am I going to be allowed to answer the question?
Carry on, we've plenty of time.
Yeah, well, please. Could you just try and be fair about this and
I am trying to be fair. Some
kind of discussion whereby I can actually answer the questions that it puts me. There's an attempt here to caricature me as somebody who's anti-peace process. I was supporting the peace process rather longer than Eamon was. I have completely supported the idea that Sinn Féin is a legitimate political force on this island, which must be allowed to take part in all the political processes in exactly the same way as everybody else. But that's the key point I'm simply making. Exactly the same way as everybody else. Let's just look at this. I mean, Sinn Féin is demanding accountability for crimes and war crimes that were committed by the British Army and by loyalists in the 1970s. The same standard should apply, right? If Bertie Ahern, for example, had stood in this election, which he wanted to do, are we seriously saying that Sinn Féin wouldn't have been out and that journalists legitimately wouldn't have been out saying, what about the dig-outs? What about what you did in the past, Bertie? It is the legitimate.
But that's why
role of journalists.
Fintan, that's why we asked Martin McGuinness the questions we asked him this morning in Cork.
Yes, no,
and that's the reason why we asked him the questions.
But then why are you talking about me singling him out? I mean, were your reporters singling him out when you were asking the question?
No, we asked him a straight question.
Yes.
It's a news gathering exercise,
and it's a perfectly legitimate question. And by the way, the answer that
yours is a commentary. It's not a news gathering exercise. It's a personal commentary. Listen, Eamon Dunphy, how can we know that Martin McGuinness is telling us the truth? Is he possibly a liar?
Well, all politicians are liars. I saw Gay Byrne on TV3 last night accusing Martin McGuinness of lying. I think all people in public life who wish to prosper have to be economical with the actuality at times. And I think we have to be grown up about that. And that's an answer. One of the things we shouldn't do is make public life inhospitable to anyone with a real character and personality who's liable to make mistakes or who have done wrong things in the past. I'd like to move on to just to make a comparison with Nelson Mandela, and I'd like to know what Fintan thinks about this. In Sharpsville in 1960, there was a peaceful protest of African people, black African people, who were living in the kind of hellhole of a slum that was worse, of course, than Northern Ireland, but was nevertheless not entirely different. They were slaughtered and taken out. The following year, Nelson Mandela formed and led the armed wing of the ANC. They were bombing, they were necklacing people with tires and burning in a most horrendous torture. And Nelson Mandela was responsible for planning and leading.
Okay, Eamon,
let me finish. Leading that campaign. Now, he was put away for a long time. He's a great man. But in that similar, very uncanny similarity with Martin McGuinness's experience as a young man in Derry, why should they be not deemed, both of them, fit?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I want to put that question. We know you stated it yesterday. Should they not both be allowed to serve as the leaders, the presidents of their people?
Yes.
That's the question. Fintan.
Okay, and I hope I will be allowed to answer the question. Okay. The comparison, first of all, between Northern Ireland and South Africa is grotesque. It really, it's a kind of hyped up overstatement which does no justice at all to any sense of historical perspective. However, let's look at the Mandela question. Again, Eamon is making statements here which have absolutely no basis in historical fact. It is absolutely true to say that Nelson Mandela was a key figure in the formation of the armed wing of the ANC, which was an entirely legitimate response to the grotesque oppression that black people and coloured people experienced in South Africa. He had absolutely no time, in fact, to actually run a military campaign. He was arrested and he was in prison for 27 years. There is not a shred of evidence that Nelson Mandela was involved in war crimes, like necklacing, for example. Eamon has conflated Nelson Mandela's formation. Look, you're going to interrupt me again. Yeah, I know. Okay, just let me finish the point. You've conflated two things. You've conflated the formation of Umkhonto Sizwe, which was, happened, and very, very quickly after that, Nelson Mandela was locked away in Robben Island and had no role at all in the direction of the ANC's military campaign. With necklacing, which happened in the last years of apartheid, necklacing was entirely wrong, by the way. And if it were true that Nelson Mandela had ordered people to be necklaced, if he had ordered the torture and murder of non-combatants, then Nelson Mandela, it would be completely legitimate to raise all of those questions about Nelson Mandela's moral standing. But there is not a shred of evidence that Nelson Mandela was involved in war crimes. There is evidence, and very strong evidence that Martin McGuinness was a senior figure in the IRA, which, and by the way, it's very interesting that nobody in this conversation, and nobody in any of the conversations that I've been involved with in the last couple of days, has denied that the IRA was involved in consistent commission of war crimes. So, the comparison here is one that simply doesn't hold water when you look at it.
Okay, listen,
Look, hold on a minute. The British government armed loyalist paramilitaries, and they killed 400 innocent nationalists.
Okay,
well, let's just take a particular case. Please let me take a particular case.
Eamon, just a second. Eamon, it's 12:30.
Sorry.
I want to ask the two of you to stay on because this is a very important conversation.
Lunchtime, with thanks to Bord Gáis Energy, helping Irish business plan ahead with fixed unit rate electricity plans.
You're listening to Lunchtime. The text line is 53106. Our two distinguished guests, Eamon Dunphy and Fintan O'Toole, have agreed to stay with us to complete this discussion, which they've started here on the programme. Now, Fintan O'Toole, I have to put it to you in my capacity as an interviewer here, that the standard you're setting for Martin McGuinness could not be applied in a large number of countries across the globe. And I will instance one country. Israel has had a succession of prime ministers and presidents since 1948. Shimon Peres, David Ben-Gurion were members of an illegal paramilitary organisation called the Haganah. Yitzhak Shamir was a member of an even more extreme organisation called the Irgun. He then took himself and his supporters to an organisation called the Lehi, which was even more extreme. He used, incidentally, the name Michael after Michael Collins. Menachem Begin was head of the Irgun. Ariel Sharon was a member of the Haganah and subsequently the Israeli Defence Forces. Moshe Dayan was a member of the Haganah. These organisations organised things like the blowing up of the King David Hotel, where 41 Arab civilians were killed, 17 Jewish civilians were killed, canteen workers. They organised the Deir Yassin massacre, where 107 civilians were killed and Arab villages were blown up. Are you saying that those people, none of those people who created the modern state of Israel, had any entitlement to be president or prime minister?
What I'm saying is that if people committed war crimes and there's evidence of those war crimes, they should have been prosecuted for them. And that it would have been absolutely legitimate in a democratic election to raise all of those issues. The whole point about human rights, right, is that you can't have bits and pieces of them. You can't say, yeah, okay, there are some circumstances in which people have human rights and there are others in which they don't. And the issue here, I think Eamon's been talking about the circumstances in which the conflict in Northern Ireland arose, the atrocities committed by loyalists, the atrocities committed by the British Army. All of that's true. The fact is, international law says, whatever the source of the conflict, it doesn't give you carte blanche to engage in murder. It doesn't give you carte blanche to engage in the most horrifically sadistic activities, like, for example, the invention of the human bomb. I mean, Al-Qaeda didn't do the human bomb, by the way, in terms of people who were forced to carry bombs. They believed in martyrdom, which was self-chosen. The IRA invented this particular notion that you would kidnap people.
Can I ask you a question? Should David Ben-Gurion and Yitzhak Shamir and Moshe Dayan and Ariel Sharon have been excluded indefinitely from leading their countries? That's a straight question to you, Fintan.
Unless and until there was a process like, as I said, I talked earlier, what we need to have is a process of truth and reconciliation, where you actually have a process whereby there is a full accounting to the victims of what was done, which is not just selective. It's not just about what this side did or that side did. It's a full accounting. When you have that process, you can then say, okay, we've had a process, and part of that process is that people are no longer liable to prosecution. There has been some kind of structure put on the thing, and you can deal with it. What we've got at the moment is an incredibly selective process, whereby Sinn Féin demands inquiries into specific atrocities which were not committed by the IRA, and then when you ask questions about the IRA, you call people West Brits. And also, by the way, you come up with stories that nobody believes. Like, there's a serious issue here with the excellent reporting that you've done today on your station, asking Martin McGuinness, did he kill anybody? Was he indirectly responsible for anybody's death? And he says no. Now, this raises, if I would suggest that if any other candidate had made a statement like that, they would be subjected to proper journalistic scrutiny and it would be regarded as entirely legitimate for journalists to do that. Just give you one example. We know, we don't know, that's an overstatement, but the Savile inquiry, which Sinn Féin fully supported, found as a matter of probability that Martin McGuinness was in possession of a Thompson submachine gun on the day of the bloody Sunday killing. We do know that Thompson submachine gun was used to kill a number of policemen in Derry in the days leading up to Bloody Sunday. I don't know whether Martin McGuinness was directly involved with that, but it is extraordinary that he had a Thompson submachine gun. It's extraordinary that he was found in the Republic with explosives in his car, and that he never used the guns or the bombs or the explosives to kill anybody either directly or indirectly. And I think, if this was any other candidate, if this was David Norris saying he was never gay, people would be saying, well, hold on a minute,
okay,
how does this tally with what we know?
Let's just put this to Eamon Dunphy now.
Well, just let me go back to Mary Robinson. Fintan has talked about human rights justice, and Mary Robinson is renowned around the world for her contributions to human rights. Would she have, do you think, shaken the hand of a man she believed was a war criminal at that time?
I simply don't speak for Mary Robinson.
You're asking to speak for her. Well, I'll tell you then. I think by invoking war criminals and by talking, and by incidentally, what you want for people to cleanse themselves before they can occupy high office is so bizarre, because if you were to apply it to the Republican Party and all who served in the Bush-Cheney administration, if you were to apply it to the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, then all of the people who are linked to Blair intimately would have to give an account such as you're asking Martin McGuinness and other people to give, because there is a truth, a reality here, Fintan, that you and I are well aware of, and everyone who's listening to this programme, that life, and particularly strife and war, they're a dirty business.
Well, Eamon,
let me finish.
Yeah, Eamon.
And that anyone who's involved in it has things that they would be ashamed of.
Yeah, Eamon, I have to put it to you that the central point Fintan O'Toole is trying to make to you is that Sinn Féin are involved in selective horror. They throw up their hands at Bloody Sunday or at the Ballymurphy murders or whatever. They don't fess up to the other side of the fence, to T-Ban Cross or Kings Mills or whatever.
Well, the reason they can't, the reason they can't fess up, Damon, is the same reason that the British can't give the information they have about the Dublin Monaghan bombings, for example. That's a good example of how a state that we have close relationship with, and that Fintan quite rightly welcomed the visit to this country recently of Queen Elizabeth, who is the Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces. And he wrote a piece for The Observer, a good piece, saying it was a great sign of maturity for both parties to this encounter, the Irish and the British people. And he was right about that. However,
Eamon,
in fact, Prince Charles, as the Commander-in-Chief of the paratroop regiment, which slaughtered people on the streets of Derry and did many other dirty things all around the world, should he, I'd like to ask Fintan, give a full account or else go to The Hague?
Fintan O'Toole, would you like to respond to that?
Firstly, on the issue of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which Eamon says is completely impractical, it's Sinn Féin policy, by the way. Sinn Féin and I completely agree on this. Martin McGuinness, as a member of Sinn Féin, completely agrees with the idea that there should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, he clearly doesn't think that it is impractical. The Eames-Bradley process, which we've had in Northern Ireland, has called for this. It's an absolute disgrace that it hasn't been done. And my point is that until that's done, we will always be in a situation whereby we either have kind of selective condemnation on one side or the other, which does real sort of damage to, see, there are living people. This is I think that you're kind of missing the point, Eamon. This isn't some sort of theoretical thing. You can talk to, and I'm sure you have talked to, the families of victims of the IRA, to families of the victims of the British Army, to families of the victims of loyalist murderers. These are living people, and they deserve, they're still hurting, they're still in grief, and they deserve some kind of accountability of what happens. Now, on the question of the Queen and Prince Charles, if you can show, and maybe you know more about than I do, that either Queen Elizabeth or Prince Charles has operational responsibility under international law, right? The issue here is, are you part of the chain of command? My understanding is that the Queen and Prince Charles are not part of the chain of command in terms of military operations by the parachute regiments. If you can show that they are and that they were complicit in war crimes, absolutely, of course, they should be treated exactly in the same way. And I would take back any welcome that I gave. You know quite well that there's rather a difference between Martin McGuinness's role in the IRA and whatever kind of theoretical role the Queen has.
Listen, on that note, I think we're out of time, I'm afraid. Fintan O'Toole of the Irish Times, Eamon Dunphy, broadcaster, writer and journalist and presenter of the Dunphy programme here every Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning. Thanks to both of you for taking part in this extended discussion.
Lunchtime, with thanks to Bord Gáis Energy, helping Irish business plan ahead with fixed unit rate electricity plans.